So now I invite our zonal director and principal of DPS Jaipur, Madam Rita Tancha, to introduce and welcome the gathering. Ma'am, please.
Good evening to the illustrious gathering today. We begin our day by welcoming and thanking Dr. Srisan Gopinath, the founder member of the CEIR. I also extend a very warm welcome to all the members of the board of directors whose thought process is the driving engine behind this beautiful initiative and bringing all the technology driven new learning to us in this age. I also welcome the zonal directors of CEIR, the premier members, principals, and educators who are here with us. The CEIR is a forum of experts and scholars who aim at nourishing the talents of educators to raise the education sector in India to a global standard. CEIR has an efficient board of directors, zonal directors, and premium members all across India and the Middle East. They all are contributing towards adding value to the teaching community of educators all over the nation. Since 2009, CEIR has conducted 11 principals conclaves, 17 interactive sessions with CBSE officials, 65 Saturday webinars, 26 handwriting made easy workshops, and 7 career counseling sessions so far. CEIR has also in its basket a successful national level NEP quiz, NEP master class webinar series, and NEP pedagogy series to its achievements. The handwriting, as we know, is one of the most essential skills for a student and beyond, which affects the student's self esteem, confidence levels, and even academic excellence. With online classes, teachers are not able to take care of students' handwriting as in normal classrooms. CEIR Veda Handwriting Lab has come up with a practical solution, a well crafted training kit with a personalized student application to help them acquire neat and legible handwriting. All the schools are welcome to try it through a virtual free Campus Connect program. You may all visit the vedahandwritingkit.com Campus Connect for more details. All the CIR activities are supported by Veda Handwriting Lab. And after the successful completion of all the programs, CEIR yet again brings to us the 21st Century Teaching Strategies workshops. Till now, we have had four training workshops, and this is the fifth workshop that is being done by CEIR for 21st Century Teaching Strategies series. We have already successfully completed Flipped Classroom, Design Thinking, 25 Ways of Teaching with Talking Less, Competency Based Learning, and today in the fifth series, CEIR is here to take us through Project Based Learning. We welcome our resource person of the day, Mr. Chris Kroeber, who has worked as a classroom teacher, director of curriculum, head of school, and most recently as head of expeditionary learning for the Heritage School in Delhi, NCR, India, where he supported the school in implementing experiential learning and project based pedagogy through the IB and Cambridge curricula. Currently, Chris is the Director of Teaching, Learning and Curriculum at Deep Prep International School in Bangkok, Thailand. He has a long and deep relationship with EL Education's expeditionary learning and is driven by a personal passion to see EL Education's expeditionary learning brought to an international context, particularly in Asia. Welcome, sir. I also take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Bhavesh Gandhi, the co-founder of Polymath School in Mumbai. He is a CA by academic training with a postgraduate degree in commerce and an MBA from the University of Kansas, USA. Always a bright student, he was in the merit list in Maharashtra in BCom in 1997 and finished his chartered accountancy along with his undergraduation, clearing all the groups in the very first attempt. His goal was to permanently settle down in the USA and climb the corporate led ladder to become the CEO of a big firm until he met his spiritual guru in 2001 and he immediately shifted back to India as he felt that this country is better for his spiritual progress. And for the last 20 years, Mr. Gandhi has spent about a third of his time in Seva and Satsang. He is also into business and co founded the Polymath School as he wanted to give back to the society. He visited many progressive schools in India and abroad before starting the school. The Polymath School is Mumbai's first K 12 project based learning school. In projects that typically last 2 to 3 months, the school integrates rich context, 21st century skills, and humane values in the context of a real life problem or a challenge. The interdisciplinary nature of projects, along with a real life context, makes learning come alive for students and teachers. Over the years, the school has become a magnet that attracts the best talent from across the country, from institutions such as Teach for India, TISS, Azim Premji University, and Experiential Education. These educators have joined the school with one single purpose to experience firsthand the joy of learning through project based learning. I request the floor to be open to the resource person, and I'm sure it's going to be an enriching, enlightening session for all the educators who are with us today. Welcome, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Rita ma'am. Thank you, Vijay ma'am, for this opportunity. I'll be honest, I wasn't aware of the Center for Educational Initiatives and Research, and I was introduced to it by Vijay ma'am, who has been a well-wisher of the school for quite some time. She's also on our advisory board. I did find out coincidentally that Sanam Budrani, who's part of our leadership team, and she's here with us. She's been a regular follower of the sessions that you have, and she's found it very inspiring. And this is a funny story, she was about to enroll for the project-based learning session that you had planned, not knowing that it was actually we who were going to do it. So, thank you, Dr. Gopinath and the entire team. I think it's a fantastic thing that you're doing. And so thank you for the opportunity. I'll be honest, I'm not a sucker for presentations like these because, you know, you have to prepare so much in advance. And then you'll be thinking, मैं ऐसे बोलूँगा, ये करूँगा, this करूँगा. It really, you just want to go with the flow mainly, but then you don't want to sound, you don't want to sound as if you're clueless. You don't want to sound like Michael from The Office. I don't know how many of you are fans of the Office series, which is in UK and US, but he famously said that one of his quips is that I don't know what I'm going to say when the sentence starts, but I hope to catch it somewhere along the way. So I don't want to sound like, Michael from The Office. At the same time, I want to make sure that all of you get a good value out of it. So I'll not waste much time. In addition to what Rita ma'am's already spoken about, Chris, once I heard from Vijaya ma'am, I thought this is a great opportunity, because ever since we started the school 5 years back, and a couple of years before that, we did a lot of research. We've been really excited about project-based learning. We've seen how it can deeply impact children, and how it can deeply impact their lives, how it can take engagement to an altogether different level for the children, for the teachers, even for the community. But I feel that, I'm just scratching the surface. There's just so much to learn about project-based learning. And I've seen some extraordinary expeditions done by the experts, in this field, Chris being one of them. So I did take up this opportunity when Vijay ma'am said that I should, but I was feeling the imposter syndrome, thinking that, maybe I'm not the best person to do this. We need to bring in an expert in this. And so I know Chris is very excited about spreading EL, or the EL way of education to the schools in Asia. And so I said, this is a great opportunity. In my mind, I was thinking, Chris, you have to bail me out. I didn't tell this to him on his face. I said, this is an exciting opportunity, and you have to be with me in presenting this. So how this is going to go is, Chris will be taking from me for another 45-50 minutes. He'll be talking about expeditionary learning, why it personally resonates with him. He'll also be talking about some wonderful expeditions that he's done over the years, some in Indian context also. And then I'll talk to you about some of the projects that we've done at Polymath School. Some housekeeping things. If you have any questions, we have our team. As I said, Sanam Budrani from a leadership team, she's going to be with us today. Hemant Mehta is also the co-founder. He's also here. And so if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the chat box, and we'll reply, or we'll try to get to it at the end. We have sent a couple of resources to you. One is a document. I think it says something like PBL resources for teachers. Actually, let me backtrack. I haven't shared this with you earlier. So maybe Hemant, if you could just share it with the team right now. So even if you have to leave in between, this is something that you can come back to later. It'll help you do a deep dive into PBL. We've put together some good resources for you to look at. And I've also sent a couple of videos to you earlier. These are projects by Stephen Levy, who's done it for Great for Children. Can I see in the chat box how many of you actually seen those videos? And we also sent an article of a project done by Chris, just to get an idea if any of you have had the time to go through it. If you could put in the chat box so we could pace our presentation accordingly. So anyway, if you even
Bhavesh, I doubt many of them may not have, very few. I think Sunita ma'am has, some of them have seen it. Otherwise,
Okay.
because we formed that group, I think yesterday or today, so they must not have got time to go through it, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
some
yeah.
of them have seen it. I see Sunita ma'am raising her hand.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll also request all the participants, as we hear the resource person speak, please keep putting your questions so that they may take it whenever they seem appropriate, or towards the end. But keep posting your questions on the chat box as you hear the resource persons.
Yeah. So the resource that Hemant has said, it's a fantastic resource for you guys to look at. And yeah, you can take a look at it. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, where we'll take your questions. We might be able to take some questions while we are talking, but a lot of those will take them at the end. And so, Chris, it's over to you.
Hello. Very honored to be here today. I appreciate, Bhavesh sir, your introduction and warm welcome, although I always bristle when I would be described as an expert on anything. But I'm happy to share what I know in my story. And I think, when one is trying to reform education at your own classroom level, when you're trying to do something different, it can feel overwhelming. And like everything, it's easy to see the obstacles, or how, when you look at other exemplars of work, well, you might not have this particular resource, or feel like you don't have the support of leadership, or you're using a different curriculum materials that feel limiting. What I'd like you all to start with, though, is the premise that everything that I'm going to share with you today was generated by teachers also facing similar challenges. And if you want to know how to really make this work, whether we call it project-based learning or experiential learning, how we make it a reality, all we have to do is look at the exact same traits we expect of our students to make it a reality. Willingness to learn something new, a willingness to accept success and failure, a willingness to reach out to others and ask for help, step out of your comfort zone, be prepared to fail. But the growth and the reward all of us can take as educators is worth facing all of that challenges. So I believe probably the most crucial part of this is going to be the questions and answers at the end. And so I'll work really hard not to speak too much and leave some time for that. But please, you can try to put your questions in the chat in real time, and I will try to address them. But in reality, we'll get to most of them probably at the end. I think I see a hand up already. Got a question or just a hand? All right, I'll keep going. So a little bit
One second, sir. Extremely sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you please unmute from your side.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt. Actually, the chat is disabled.
No, everybody is chatting, ma'am. Everybody is there.
No, it is disabled.
We will check it, ma'am. Sir, you continue. We will rectify it. Don't worry, ma'am.
It's chat disabled.
That's great feedback. Thanks for letting us know. All right, I am going to try to share my screen here and see if I can get this to work. Mostly we're just going to be chatting, but I do have a couple of slides. Maybe Bhavesh sir, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint on the screen? Excellent.
Yes.
So a little bit on jargon just to get out of the way. I've happened to use the word experiential learning, and if you feel cheated because you thought you were coming to a workshop on project-based learning, know that I really feel most of these terms are interchangeable. Over the years, I've drifted towards the phrase experiential learning simply because it's the largest basket in which I can fit everything else that people tend to talk about. So project-based learning is kind of a thing now. You can Google it, there are sites on it, there are books on it, and it has certain jargon and technique. There's inquiry-based learning, there's Waldorf, there's Reggio, there's IB Primary Years Program, there's expeditionary learning, so many different models. And some educators put a lot of energy into parsing the difference between them. I tend to definitely come down on the side that they all have far more in common, and their commonalities are far more significant than their differences. So you'll tend to hear me use the term experiential learning. Same thing as project-based learning, same thing as inquiry-based learning. So as was said in my introduction, I did spend 2 years in India working with the Heritage School in Delhi NCR. I'm now here in Bangkok, Thailand, doing the exact same work. And I had a career in the United States doing the exact same work. And to me, again, for those of you who are feeling challenged by reinterpreting some of what we present today to your context, please take some inspiration from that. Because my experience working both in the United States and now in India and Thailand just reaffirms me that the deep structure of these practices in designing learning experience for children are universal. I've seen them work in such vastly different types of schools, from American public schools to schools in Delhi NCR to now here in Thailand. The exact same things again and again prove to be very effective. So I believe that we are distilling some highly replicable practices, and hopefully that will help you have confidence that you can think how this will work for your own context. So you heard Bhavesh sir use this term, an expedition. And I'm just going to very briefly, I could go on and on about the subject of the history of expeditionary learning, but I'm just going to touch on it very briefly about why you're going to hear this term expedition. So Expeditionary Learning is an organization that's now called EL Education USA. And it was formed about 30 years ago came out of an organization called Outward Bound that originally took its inspiration from a lot of work by an individual named Kurt Hahn, who actually started schools. So Outward Bound was primarily doing outdoor education. And that can sometimes be a little distracting because people assume that expeditionary learning or experiential learning is not about academics. It's about taking kids in the outdoors. But it really was the pedagogy of Outward Bound coming into schools. What happened in the US context was the United States government put out a request for proposals for school reform models saying, look, we've tried to improve outcomes in schools for years and years, and we've had very little progress in moving the needle in terms of making schools more effective. So Outward Bound, which did not actually have any formal academic schools at the time, asked themselves a really important question, which was, why did so many young people experience tremendous growth and success on their trips? And many of these same young people were not thriving in regular American public schools. So why were they so successful in the Outward Bound context, but not in the school context? And when they reflected on this, they came up with a couple of key variables that was the initial insight into developing expeditionary learning. So one of them is that when students are on a trip, like an expedition, and I have a slide here of a bunch of students on a type of boat they use for their trips called a pulling boat. One of the most important things they realized is that on these trips, students have to acquire new skills. They have to acquire new knowledge, they have to work together, and they have to demonstrate learning and growth. The same thing that ostensibly students need to do in an academic school. But why were they successful on these Outward Bound trips and not in a school? Well, fundamentally, what they learned on these trips, students actually had to immediately apply to the real world. So we see these students on this pulling boat, and one of them has a map and compass. You can see her in the upper right-hand corner. And before she got on this boat, she didn't know anything about how to read a map, how to chart a course, how to read wind and tides, how to add different vectors together to determine the direction of travel. So just like in a school, she's had to learn skills, knowledge. She's having to use math. She's having to work as a team. She's having to use geography. But the key variable is how well she does her job has real world consequences. Whether or not, when it's her turn to be in charge, this boat full of people as a crew make it to their island in time, to set up camp before it rains, to cook dinner together, to be safe, will all depend on how well she does her job. So her motivation and her application for what she is learning goes way beyond simply a marks on a test and somebody's arbitrary judgment about how good a job she's done. How good a job she's done is really going to be determined by her authentic ability to navigate this boat and get everybody someplace safe. So I think there's so many elements of the expedition that are relevant to making learning more engaging and effective in the classroom. But to me, this is one of the most essential ones, because if we think about what we ask students to do in school, we realize it is often extremely contrived. There's never really an authentic application beyond tests, quizzes, and exams to assess their learning. Furthermore, in terms of their motivation to do their very best work, what motivation do we offer them in schools? Often it pretty much boils down to learn or I'll hurt you. And that hurt usually comes about in the form of shame by we're going to give you bad marks and bad grades, and we're going to make you feel bad about yourself. So primarily the motivation to acquire new skills and knowledge in a traditional academic school is avoidance of shame. Now let's compare that to these students on this expedition. For them, their motivation is everybody's safety, everybody having a good time, everybody getting to where they need to go. So we've replaced that artificial mark schemes, exams, and shame with service, working together as a crew, and the authentic application of everything they're learning to achieve a common goal. So when you hear us use a lot of this language about expedition or expeditionary learning or learning expedition, which you'll hear, it really comes from this organization Outward Bound that 30 years ago spawned a school design model that was bringing all these pedagogical variables into the classroom. So the basic question of what if learning was like going on an expedition, we're still answering it as we design this model. But that's just a little bit of the history. Now, a little bit more about experiential learning. Is it new or is it old? Well, I just described it as something new. It's part of progressive education. I know it's newly part of the discourse in India. Bhavesh was just filling me in on some of the latest developments in CBSE, which I think is really exciting. And I actually had the honor of meeting one of the leaders of CBSE about 2.5 years ago, where I heard some of the initial echoes of this. So it's easy for us to look at experiential learning as something new and progressive. But I would also like to raise the idea that in fact, experiential learning is not new. It's actually very conservative in the sense that it's going back to the way that human beings have learned the necessary skills and knowledge and character traits to survive in their communities for thousands and thousands of years. If you think about it, our modern conception of what a school is and the educational system is very recent. For most communities and cultures around the world, it's really less than 100 years old that we've been trying to put all students through this model. So if we think about, well, how did young people learn what they needed to survive in their economies and their communities? It was through experiential learning. And I have a couple images here that evoke that. One is the classic apprenticeship, right? Young people worked alongside adults to acquire the skills and knowledge and character traits in increasingly authentic tasks until they eventually could take over, and do the things that the adults in their community did. I also found, again, in the case of the Indian context, I'm definitely speaking outside of my own expertise. But the Gurukul system, as I spoke with many fellow educators in India, the idea that character education is part and parcel of development of academic learning is absolutely not a new idea in India. In fact, India has one of the richest traditions in this conception of educating the whole being and developing a really strong personal relationship with an educator, and that character education is part of the cultivation of all knowledge. That is not a new idea. So you can do your own research on this and play around, but I think it's important. On one hand, yes, all of us are involved in education reform, and progressive education. But in many ways, we are going back to the roots of how humans have learned for a very long time. All right. Before I get into some of the fundamentals of what we're doing with designing experiential learning, I want to make sure we develop a little bit of a common vocabulary because these terms are mixed a lot. So when I work with my own community of teachers and our parents, when I talk about our academic program, I always try to break it down into 3 strands that we are weaving together when we build any academic program. And whether this is CBSE, IB, Cambridge, whatever model, American public school systems or American style education, you always have these 3 strands. Sometimes the names get mixed up or confused, but for me, these are the terms that I'm going to be using. And I think this will help you find what we're describing accessible. So in any academic program, we have standards, or if you use Cambridge, you might call these learning objectives, or you might refer to this as the syllabus. The standards are the lists of things that somebody has determined students need to know. So this is your skills and knowledge. Now, it doesn't tell you how to teach them. It doesn't give you necessarily the exact units of curriculum to implement them, but they are the lists. They are the guiding standards, often mapped to individual grade levels or grade bands of all the stuff kids need to know. Spelling, grammar rules, math facts, historical dates and figure, whatever it is, that lives in your standards. The second strand is curriculum. Now the curriculum is mapped to the standards, But here is where we get into the actual materials that we're going to use to unpack these standards. So curriculum might be textbooks. Curriculum might be a syllabus with a bunch of materials that a teacher has put together. Or a curriculum might be a customized unit of curriculum that teachers have authored. So if you work in the PYP, these would be your units of inquiry. When you hear Bhavesh and I speak, we talk about learning expedition. These are units of curriculum that are mapped to standards. Now, why this is important is the standards inform the curriculum we develop, but they aren't the same. So there is more than one body or developed curriculum that can be used to teach the same standards. And that should give you freedom if you say, yeah, but I have this particular framework. When you develop your own curriculum based, you can unpack any set of standards by developing your own curriculum. Now, the third strand is pedagogy. And this is one of the most critical ones for us to unpack. So the pedagogy, it's not the standards, it's not the curriculum, it's how we teach. And these are this is a slide I use with my own community quite a bit to explore this idea. So on either side of my slide here, I have a group of students who are studying science, all right? They both have access to textbooks. They're both in about a middle school science class, and they're both learning some biology and ecology. So they're following the same standards, right? Learning middle school, science, ecology, skills, and knowledge. And they're both basically following the same curriculum about learning ecology principles, such as producers and consumers, or how energy flows through an ecosystem. What's really different, though, about these two learning experiences is the pedagogy, how we deliver it. So in one image, we have students sitting with textbooks, they're working independently, and primarily they're just asked to memorize scientific knowledge for a test assessment. The other group of students, they had textbooks, they spent some time reading and answering questions, but in this image, these are actually some of our students at our school. They are out in a national park, and you can see the man in the green shirt. They're working with an actual park ranger ecologist, and they are doing research in the park. One student's using an iPad to document evidence of producers, consumers, and energy flow in the rainforest in preparation for making a field guide. So same standards, same curriculum, but vastly different learning experiences because they're different in pedagogy. One group are just memorizing science, primarily based on memorization. But the other group is asking questions, they're doing primary research, they're interacting with experts, they are working as a scientist. Again, at an apprenticeship level, not at a doctoral level, but as a high level middle school level. So if we think about this slide, we often can't choose our standards. Sometimes we can kind of choose our curriculum, or we can develop parts of it, and we'll have some examples of that. But absolutely, this area of pedagogy, this is one of the most powerful levels we have to pull in experiential learning. And this is often where you have the greatest ability to implement change. All right. Now, this is a slide I hope that we can give out to you and you can explore it asynchronously. And there's a lot to unpack here. But as we go into a look at one of the projects I want to explore with you, I've tried to distill down some of the most essential elements that we use when designing experiential learning or project-based learning. And gosh, we could spend an hour on each of these. And so it's going to be a little bit fast, but even if you bring in one of these practices into your classrooms, I think you will find a marked difference in your outcomes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give these to you now, and then I'm going to go look at some examples of student work. And I'm going to ask you to keep these in mind and try to find evidence of all these different practices in the student work that we look at. So first one is compelling topic. So good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to learn about migration. Well, that might be interesting to some, but to your average middle schooler, not such a compelling topic. However, if we had a group of outside experts come into our classroom and say, Students, I need your help. There are stories in your community that are not being told. Some incredible narratives and characters of individuals that live right around us every day in our own city that are absolutely invisible. And nobody's documenting, in fact, these people's stories aren't even in the major presses in India today. Would you help me uncover these stories and make sure the voices of these people are heard? That's a little bit more of a compelling topic. For those of you who've seen the salmon article that I was shared with you, good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to learn about water chemistry. Not so interesting to your average middle school. But if you start with students, the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to be sending us 300 endangered Atlantic salmon eggs. And we have to build an incubator, an aquarium incubator, to take care of these fish eggs so that we can raise them and bring them to a river and restore this species that's gone extinct, geographically extinct. Can you help us? That becomes compelling. So choosing the right compelling topic is essential in creating your curriculum. Explicit character development targets. Often in school, we see character as sort of secondhand. And by character, I'm going far beyond just students being nice to each other. Here I'm talking about resilience for success and failure, or for example, the ability to work in groups. So when we develop curriculum, after we have our compelling topic, being able to identify explicitly what are the ways in which we think these experiences are going to develop the character of our students is absolutely critical. All right, this next idea, professional skill sets. Now, this is a bit of my own term, and I will add, it has the asterisk number, is mapped to the learning objectives or syllabus or standards. So anyone who thinks experiential learning is about dialing down rigor and making learning more fun by turning it into play has fundamentally misunderstood what's happening at the heart of experiential learning. In a way, I advise you to use this trick when you're trying to sell this to your administrators or your parents. But one of the things I often do, if I'm sitting in the room with a graphic designer, an architect, a doctor, a business professional, a lawyer, I often say, okay, when was the last time you took a test? And there's dead silence. Most of them have not taken a test since they left whatever was their last year of schooling or higher education. This is something we don't question that much, but let that sink in. Think about how much time we spend in conventional schools preparing students to take tests and exams. A skill set that they will never use again in their lives once they leave school. It doesn't exist. Engineers don't take exams. They build bridges, they work together, they design rockets, they write code, they do lots of things that draw on the skills and knowledge and the character that they learned in school, but they don't demonstrate that through exams. They don't ever apply it through exams. It's a completely contrived, artificial way to group skill sets and to draw on them to demonstrate them. So again, we could spend a lot of time on that, but one of the things we have to do is when we develop our experiential learning curriculum is to think, how do real professionals use the same skill sets we find in our learning objectives, our syllabus, or our standards? We have to think, how does a journalist actually use research skills, their literacy skills, their grammar skills, their reading skills, their math and data analysis skills? How does a doctor use them? How does a civil engineer use them? Think of any profession. So we start mapping our learning objectives or our standards, not just in the classic exam schema, but in thinking about how do real professionals use these outside of the context of school. All right, field work. This is a little jargony, but think of the classic field trip, which often doesn't have much of a purpose, and students mostly remember what they had for lunch. And we replace this with the idea of field work. This is primary research that students do outside of the classroom, where they are actually using their professional skill sets in asking questions, acquiring knowledge, conducting experiments, or doing original research. So field work, absolutely essential. The next one, experts. Students inherently doubt the validity of their teachers because they know the contrived nature of school. But when they hear from a doctor, a journalist, a graphic designer, a photographer about how they are using these professional skill sets, their level of engagement and their drive to do their best work increases. So connecting your learning objectives with experts who actually use the skills and knowledge is essential. Next, authentic products. So having a real world authentic demonstration. Now, you may think I'm against tests, quizzes, and exams. Absolutely not. We need both. We all still exist in ecosystems that require our students to do well in exams. And we won't prove the validity of experiential learning if we don't also make sure our students are prepared for these exams, tests, and quizzes. However, as I said before, journalists don't take tests, but they do write stories, and they do combine images and color and graphics and words to tell a story. So having an authentic product that draws on the field work, what we learn from experts, and these professional skill sets that allow students to demonstrate their knowledge is essential. Next, authentic audience. Again, in schools, the only audience for student achievement and growth is the teacher. This is, again, completely contrived. So if we have authentic products demonstrating student learning and growth, we need an authentic audience for them to present them to. And last, active citizenship, which is a term a lot of us are using now for what we used to call service learning. If you relate to the term service learning, this is essentially the same thing, but we sort of broaden the term in terms of active citizenship, that there needs to be a bit of a moral compass to the work that we're asking students to do. And we all believe, we can spend a lot of time on why this is so important, but active citizenship. So these are some of the essential design elements that go into creating our learning experiences. All right. So I'm going to show you a few images from one of our learning expeditions. I'm going to go through, again, I can spend a lot of time on these, and maybe we can go back and ask some questions. But in terms of developing a compelling topic, let's go back. So what's happening here? What you're seeing in this picture, this was at the Heritage School. This is a group of 7th graders. And they're meeting with the 2 women in the front are from an organization that I hope some of you know. And if you don't know it, every one of you should Google it at the end of this presentation, because they do absolutely fantastic work. These are 2 women, professional journalists from the People's Archive of Rural India, also known as PARI. PARI is a journalistic organization based on the basic premise that approximately 60% of Indians still live in the rural context, but they make up less than 1% of all major media outlets' stories. So PARI, the founding journalist at PARI, realized that a large segment of the Indian population had essentially become invisible in the modern media ecosystem. And so they created PARI to capture and document these stories. So we staged where these 2 journalists came in, and they're presenting on their work to these 7th graders, and they're getting really exciting. And they turned to them and they said in their own community, you know what? You're all excited about this work we're doing, but the same thing is happening in your community. All around you, there are stories of individuals that are not being captured, that are not making it into press. Would you be willing to go in and do some research in your own community and find these stories? And by the end of this 1-hour session, students were turning to their teachers and begging them to do curriculum that the teachers had been designing for months, but they had been able to give them a compelling topic about them actually getting to work as journalists as themselves. So here we are laying the groundwork for a compelling topic. All right. What's happening in this picture? Well, it's a combination of field work, but it's also experts. So one of the things is they started to understand that the work that these journalists did was the power of the image, right? The power of photography was essential in their professionally published stories. So we were very fortunate to discover that in Gurgaon is the largest camera museum in South Asia, possibly all of Asia. And so much, never underestimate the power of asking. So this individual here, Aditya, I just found him online, reached out to him, said, please, would you work with us? When he heard our idea, he was so thrilled. So again, these students are learning the skill set of photojournalism and how to take journalistic quality photographs from a real world-renowned expert. This is an incredibly accomplished professional photographer. But he is here actually teaching the students. So they're in the process of getting ready to work as journalists themselves. Now, some of you, I'm sure, are starting to say, yeah, but what about your standards? What about the syllabus? I don't have time for this. Well, what we can't go into as much detail here, but I'm going to give you my email address and I'll follow up, is when we started to map, remember I said we map the standards, the learning objectives to the compelling topic, to the learning experiences, we found out that the physics of light and sound were in the science curriculum at 7th grade. So perfect. We used our opportunity of going to the camera museum and having students understand how a camera works and how videography works to directly teach them the physics of light and sound. Photons, wave motion, how a lens works, how light is reflected. But they had a reason to learn now. Instead of all these science concepts just being taught in isolation, where again, the only chance they had to demonstrate their learning was a test. They still took tests, but how well and how effectively they could use a camera was also a demonstration of their learning of science objectives. So we're starting to see how the standards come into a compelling topic, and here we have an expert. Now that was how the science standards fit in, but what about all your humanities, English language arts? Well, here you see a practice. These two women here are the professional journalists from PARI, who again, they were so excited about our project, they agreed to come up, and they're giving a model interview about how they would actually interview a respondent in the field. So this is one of our volunteers, Renu ma'am, who was an Adivasi immigrant to Gurgaon. So she fit the model of someone who was not from Gurgaon, but had migrated there for work. Who had this incredible, compelling story. She worked as a maid in Gurgaon, not necessarily someone who the students would normally think of interviewing and telling their story. But one of the things is they were starting to unpack their stories of character. They'd done their English language arts work. They had been learning about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Any of you are English teachers or do that kind of work will recognize that. I won't go into details on it. They'd also done some background work in their Cambridge lower secondary global perspective class on migration, economics. But one of the things that they learned about Renu here was Renu actually lost both her parents by the age of 12 and was left orphaned with 4 younger siblings to take care of. Went to work full-time on the tea plantations in Assam at age 12. So when they mapped this to the hero's journey and the journey to the underworld, the sort of the trying, difficult, dark time that the hero myth story goes through, they realized, oh my goodness, this is the human story. And to hear from Renu how she kept her 4 younger siblings not only alive, but all of them completed education, most of them higher education, and now have various professional jobs based on the character traits she was able to draw on at age 12 while picking tea all day in Assam with no help, nobody took them in, so that somebody who they would often only see in their context of this is an Adivasi woman working as a maid, as a domestic, actually has an incredible story about the character traits necessary for success in life. At the same time, their own personal narrative marries the hero journey. So it's connected with books that they were reading in their English language arts class. At the same time, they're learning interview skills, they're learning videography skills, and they're again interacting with experts in terms of learning how to be journalists. So they looked at an exemplar. Then it was time for the students to do their own journalistic work. And when we designed this project, we didn't want to make it about just people in the economically weaker sector or the organized sector versus the unorganized sector. Our emphasis was on the common human story that cut across all sections of Gurgaon. We call this learning expedition, Who is Gurgaon, with a play on that Gurgaon was really about the people. So here you see two students who've named, now they fanned off and they're working as journalists. In their global perspective class, they've developed a set of questions, they've understood rubrics and metrics for understanding migration and immigration. And here they're interviewing a small business owner in Gurgaon who is describing his own life. He's Kashmiri, about his journey moving from Kashmir to Gurgaon, about the challenges that he faced, both the opportunities he found in a new city like Gurgaon, the challenges when people would recognize his name as being Kashmiri, where he sometimes couldn't get an apartment, or people wouldn't rent to him because they made certain assumptions about him. He has a very successful shop here selling textiles from Rajasthan. Incredible story. So they're learning about how a small business works, and now they're actually working as journalists. Here's another group. This group is getting ready to take a picture for their own journalistic work, and here they're interviewing a Banjara woman, also in Gurgaon in their community. You can see vastly different context than our Kashmiri small businessman, but they're asking the same kind of questions. They're doing the interview. But I threw this slide in here because, again, you're saying, well, where's the science? Well, everything they learned about light and sound and how photons travel in a wave, they're applying here, because one of the things that we discovered is that we could not bring all these people we were interviewing to our school to a photography studio. We had to design our own photography studio and take it out into the field. So you see the black tarp behind them that they've got set up. There's a student using a reflector because it was impractical to take lights. Another student, they've met with the expert at the camera museum. He's getting ready to take the picture up. And they've also learned how to talk to their respondent to set them up to get them ready to take their portrait for their own journalistic work. Here they are doing the interview section. So you saw the two students interviewing the Kashmiri small businessman. These students are using the same questions, same types of questions they developed to capture this story of this Banjara woman. One of the things I remember from this is that the unintended consequences. So some of you are wondering, okay, I see experts, I see field work, I see a compelling topic, I see professional skill sets, they're working as photographers, journalists, but what about those character targets? Well, I was at the debrief for these students after they interviewed this Banjara woman. And they all said, we cannot believe how much she spoke about wanting better education for her child and wishing she could settle down in one place. So what they discovered was this community had just received notice that they were going to be pushed off of the land that they'd been camping on and selling their wares in approximately 7 days. And the community was in absolute panic about where they were going to go. This woman, a mother, was explaining to the students what she would give to be able to settle down so her children could have a better education and further themselves in school. And they all reflected on, we had no idea. We assumed that they liked the lifestyle. That's why they lived that way. They didn't care about education. They didn't care about owning property or being in one place. We had no idea. All these students acknowledged that they'd been to Banjara markets many, many times, had bought stuff, but they never had a substantive humanizing conversation until this moment. And the insight that they gained, realizing that they'd missed the story of these individuals, begins to speak to that character development, that service learning, where they said, no, we can never look at this group the same way again. And we think it's really important for us to get their story out so that people don't make the same mistake we did. All right, I'm going to end on this last slide from these pictures, and then we're going to take a look at the final product. This is one of my favorite pictures from this entire project. These are two students. They're interviewing a woman here who is an out-of-work maid. She's Nepalese from Nepal, She came to Delhi, I believe, when she was 9 years old, and immediately started working as a maid alongside her mother. So she never had the luxury of formal education. We are in a village next to one of the upscale communities of Gurgaon, called the Nirvana Country, where many people in the unorganized sector or maids or cobblers or other type people lived. And these students never in their life, they've gone by this community hundreds, thousands of times, had never set foot in it. The look on these young women's face captures much of what we are trying to do when we do experiential learning. You could put different words on it. I would use engagement. They are fully engaged. But essentially what's happening here is the child's emotions are awoken. This is no longer about grades. This isn't about an exam, although grades and exams happen. It's not even about teacher expectations. The things that this woman as a young mother was telling our two students about her feelings about being Nepalese in this community in Gurgaon, feeling like she didn't fit in and because of the way she looked, feeling that her safety as a woman and what she dealt with every day was at risk, and her hopes and dreams for her family absolutely blew their mind. And again, in the debrief after we met with these students, they turned to each other and said, how did a woman who never went to school, how was she able to have such complicated thoughts and think about all these things? She sounded like our mothers, like our grandmothers, when they spoke about women's rights in the Indian context, when they spoke about women's safety. We never imagined that a woman like her would be able to think about these things because she never went into school. And they turned to each other. They weren't even paying attention to the adults and said, we have to tell her story. We have to let people know what individuals like her, how strong they are, how smart they are, what character assets they have every day just to get through their lives, and that we have far more in common than we have a difference. At this point, our work as educators is just to get out of the way. The students' emotional investment, their engagement, their readiness to be leaders of their own learning, it's there. So, little bit of a galloping gourmet on some of these design elements. I now want to move us to what the product actually looks like. So I need to find my next screen. Boy, I've been doing a lot of talking, but all right. So we saw experts, compelling topics, field work. But what about, what's this product and authentic audience? Well, again, as I said, journalists don't write essays to be marked by teachers, and they don't take science tests. They do real work. So the ultimate work from this was two-part. First was students created a book. And I'm not able to, this is a proof of the book. I don't have an actual copy here in front of it, and COVID derailed our ability to publish this the way that we want to, but we still plan to. The title of the book was Every Face Has a Story. 7th grade international school students present. And what you'll see is an explanation, but each group produced in their small group a black and white portrait of all their respondents, and had to write an article telling their story just like the professional journalists that they had been inspired by at the beginning. So this woman is actually a corporate lawyer working in Cyber City in Gurgaon. Here we have a cobbler. Here we have Renu, who you saw being interviewed. Here's Sapna, the woman from Nepal, the Kashmiri businessman. This man here was originally, he was Punjabi, and his family were refugees in Delhi during partition. So what came up for students when they learned his story and what happened to him, he was in Old Gurgaon. On and on, we have down here our Banjara mother and her story. So each of the articles had a common structure, whether they were looking at the hero's journey, but each students were able to get at a distinct narrative, just like the journeys journalists did. Now you'll notice that each one of these images also has a QR code. So what we were able to do is, I don't know if this is going to automatically switch. Bhavesh, can you tell me, can you see this next website, or do I need to share this page separately?
I'm not able to see the website.
All right, so I have to go back to Zoom here. Give me 1 second. I'll do it this way. Zoom. Stop sharing. Let me go back. Zoom.
You can share the whole screen.
Yeah, it's desktop one. Let me try that. Share. All right, how about now?
Yeah, I can see it, yes.
Tale of the Banjara. So in that portrait you have of that Banjara woman, you'll notice that we were kind of limited in the learning that we could demonstrate in the book, because we have the black and white portrait and we have the short article. But again, some of you are thinking, this sounds great, but where are all those other standards? Where's the syllabus? Well, in the website that each student's built, we were able to get at some of the other learning objectives that we needed to uncover in this particular learning expedition. So that when the idea was that these portraits could be published and that people would come by and interact with them, they could click on the QR codes and that would take them to these websites where they would get into being able to look at some of the other student work here. So here you see some work on geography. They did research about where the people had come from, about the history, about migration. They had to show proper citation and their research skills. All the different elements. So here was a longer write-up they did in the style of the journalists. Some background on Rajasthan. You can see all the other learning that we were able to pack into these websites. So when we put this all together, you can see we've solved that problem of the professional skill sets. They had to work as photographers. They had to work as researchers. There actually was a ton of data analysis in their global perspective class, where they looked at things as disparate as the timetables of buses in Gurgaon over the last 15 years. And they were incredible. It doesn't sound very interesting, but in the context of their work, they could see the history of migration as Gurgaon went from a sleepy little village to the booming new city that in Delhi NCR that it is today, by just looking at where all the new bus routes came in, where were people coming from, and why. So all this learning is all mapped back to this compelling topic of this particular learning expedition. So I think I'm just about out of time, but I do want to show you one other example of some of these elements in a completely different context, because the one I just showed you, was really organized around working as a journalist with the science behind the photography and the film. But here was I'm going to shift gears. Just quickly, look for some of these same exact design elements of compelling topic, experts, authentic audience, field work in this next one. So this is part of a learning expedition called We Can't Wait. And We Can't Wait was all about, let me go back to this view here. In the We Can't Wait learning expedition, these are now 8th graders, and this one was a little bit more science based. Students were given the challenge of trying to solve a sustainability issue in modern India. And they went in small groups in all different directions. So in this particular group, they were focused on the issue of solid cooking fuels. So you see in their research, they found 3 billion people use solid cooking fuels. 80% of rural homes in India continue to use biomass, firewood, crop residue, or cow dung as the primary cooking fuel. And they took this on as their design challenge for what they wanted to solve. So some students did farming, some students did groundwater replenishing. This particular group did this issue of cooking fuel. Now, what you're seeing here is their PowerPoint presentation from essentially what was, if you know the show Shark Tank, students, again, rather than just turning this into a teacher to get feedback through some kind of a mark scheme, part of their experience was they had to present a business pitch to an outside panel of experts asking for funding. And so we used the Shark Tank model. And we actually had the founder of one of the first solar panel companies in India. We had a business developer and a venture capitalist, 3 non-educator adults. And the students, they had to do this virtually because now we were in, this was after, by probably March of 2020 when we'd already gone into virtual school. But I wanted to show you, even in virtual school, just by having an authentic audience. So students were motivated not just by what the grades they were going to get, but knowing these were real business professionals, because it's very easy to come up with a sustainability idea. It's much harder to make it economically viable. And we all know if the idea is not economically viable, it's probably not going to actually happen. So they presented their problem. They had to use graphs and data from their math class, looking at trends over time in Indian households, patterns of cooking, state their problem, and then give their elevator. So they had a company name, and their solution was they looked at different options in terms of their effectiveness, using all kinds of math and science, and they made the pitch for why they thought biofuel was better than the geothermal heat pumps or solar panels. And part of it was, you know, solar panels sound great, but the cost and the infrastructure that had to be put in place for them to be successful versus the biofuel. So they had to pitch, and they had a couple different versions of what their biogenerators were. And eventually they came up with this design, had to explain how it was going to work, give all the biology, the math, the science behind it. But they're doing it within the context of presenting this to these business professionals to explain the business feasibility. So they have a cost of how much they think that's going to cost, what their selling price is going to be, the job opportunities, community integration. Think about all the skills. Let's talk about their numbers. So they got into it to try to convince the team that it was going to be a good investment and they weren't going to lose their money. You know, and they gave this as a live presentation, knowing that these were real business people. So just like on the other one, we also had them build a website where they could curate all the different learning that they had done. Talking about, I think some of these permissions might be a little out of date. They had to write an individual global perspective project. So there's so many other little subunits that are taking place in the background. But again, they're all mapped back to this compelling topic about how they are going to make a difference in their own communities. And one of the really interesting learnings that I always like to highlight, and I think I'll close on this note for this one, is the unexpected real world learning. And if we want to talk about how experiential learning is going to give these students a competitive edge, it is so important to highlight these moments. Because again, so much of school, preparing students to take tests and exams, that's not real world. But people who can solve problems, who can look at things organically, and who can identify what are the real obstacles for success, those are the ones who are going to be most successful. So one of the things that they discovered in this project is, if you zoom into this picture, they had initially, when they were interviewing village heads or they were talking about this, they realized they were talking to a lot of men. But what they discovered was, who is doing the cooking? Who is burning the fuels in these villages, and who is suffering the health consequences of being around all these combustion byproducts and air quality? It's women. So they realized they were focusing on the wrong group. If they were actually going to make this development project work, they were going to have to understand the context of women and figure out how to reach girls and women in these villages and empower them to become the owners and the maintainers and the users of this biogas technology in order for it to have a difference. So what seems like it starts as a science project, as an engineering, lots of math, maybe some business and economics, really gets into the context of social science and active citizenship. Because once again, the status and empowerment of girls and women become central to the potential success or failure of these projects. And all the students reflected, they did not see this coming. They did not see gender and the status of women as going to be a relevant issue in this, but they realized they could get all the science right, but if they got that project, that part of the project wrong, this would never work because they wouldn't have actually reached the end user. So that kind of holistic, organic, forward thinking is what is going to breed the next generation of business leaders, government leaders, engineers, startup, venture business developers. That is the skill set we really want. It includes mastery of knowledge and skills for success on their exams, but it goes so much farther and so much deeper. All right, so done a lot of talking. I'm just going to end back on this note, and I hope, again, this was so fast. We spend a year laying this out with our staff, but look at how we used compelling topic, explicit character development targets, professional skill sets, fieldwork, experts, authentic products, authentic audience that we put those products in front of, and combining it all, active citizenship to create powerful experiential learning that empower students for success. And the last note I'll make on this, if you have families saying, yeah, but all I care about is getting my kid into an Ivy League school, getting them into Harvard, the reality of college admissions, particularly in the Western context of North America, Canada, United States, particularly, it is the kind of portfolio of what students will have done from these experiential learning curriculum that is going to make them the most competitive for these Ivy League top-notch schools. So feel free to point that out to their parents. Yes, good grades and SAT scores, exam scores are going to be there, but all the kids applying to those schools are going to have those. Not all of them are going to have told the story of a Banjara woman in a powerful way that actually got published. Not all of the students are going to design a biogas generator to empower women in the rural sectors of India and improve their life expectancies by reducing their exposure to carcinogens from burning cow dung. That kind of real world application of skills and knowledge is what's going to give these students an edge for getting into top universities, as well as make them the change makers that our society so desperately needs in the future. So I just talked to you for a long hour. I hope you got something from that you could relate to, get excited about, get inspired. I got excited again, just looking at all that curriculum and thinking about those experiences those students have. These are some really high-level, complicated projects, but focus on the structural elements of what we did. Those basic core elements we do again and again and again, and they work. Even if you can only incorporate a couple of them, they will be effective. I will be sharing my email, and I'll turn it over to Bhavesh sir, where you'll see some of those similar applications of techniques at the fabulous Polymath School.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm glad you could come in and be part of this presentation. So I'll tell you a bit of a history of Polymath School before I get into showing you some of the work that we've done. So we saw all this brilliant work happening, the kind that Chris showed us. We did a lot of research on it. We went and visited a lot of these project-based learning schools, and we thought that we absolutely must get this kind of education to India. We must get our students to go through this kind of education. And it was extraordinary to get an opportunity to do so. So we started a school which is primarily a project-based learning school. And how our school works is every teacher does 2 or 3 expeditions or projects every year with her students. And those are initially, we started designing our own, and then we realized that there's some way for us to go before we actually start designing really high quality expedition, which has all the elements that Chris spoke about. And so essentially, most of our teachers, what they're doing right now is they're using a project that other teachers have designed, and then a curriculum is built around that. It's called the EL Education curriculum. It's open source. EL Education is a not-for-profit organization, so it's available for anyone and everyone who wants to tap into it. So that's what our teachers do. But at the same time, we did want to give them a feel of designing their own expeditions, and not be completely dependent on expeditions that others have designed, or the curriculum that EL has given. And so we have a few of those, and I wanted to share that with you. But before I do that, just a couple of quick things that I wanted to say to all of you is that what we hope you take away from this is the inspiration. I think doing projects is an art and a science and a craft that is mastered over years and years. So we don't expect you to become experts, at the end of it. I've been doing this for 7 years now, or 6 years, and I just feel I'm scratching the surface. So it's a long way to go to be able to actually implement it. But we do hope you get excited about it. And how can you not get excited? Kind of work that Chris has shown. And hopefully you research more into it, and you'll be able to start with a few elements of an expedition, then maybe design your own expedition as you go forward. And as I said, we've shared some resources that will look at it again at the end. So I have about half an hour. So I had 3 expeditions in mind, which I was going to show you. But probably I think I'll just walk you through one, and then we'll see how much time we have. So let me share my screen with you. But before that, so one expedition that we thought, so one element of curriculum that we thought, have in our school is students connect with nature. There's so much that children can love from nature, and especially in metropolitan cities like Mumbai, which is a concrete jungle. Children feel totally disconnected from nature, and they feel that nature is something to protect against. We've been so mollycoddled that we've lost to connect with nature. And right from the first year, we knew that learning from nature or designing expeditions around nature is going to be a big part of what we do. And so in the first year, we had our nursery KG1 sessions, nursery and KG1 students do an expedition called Grow Your Garden. So they designed an expedition. Sorry, they did an expedition, and at the end of it, they published A to Z learning book. Where A would be for some aspects of the, it would be for Apple, and then they would talk about it and basically go A to Z and talk about different aspects of the alphabet, but as they are related to the garden or to the farming space. And then they would do an authentic painting, and then they would write. Obviously, nursery kids can't write, and so they talk about it, and the teachers write it for them. So this was a project that we did for NKG1. Then we thought that this is so good, and our children are so excited, our teachers are so excited, maybe we should do it for the whole school. And so then came the idea of doing an organic farming expedition. And Chris has shared his email with you. I see it on the chat box, but also the document that we share with you. Some of you have asked for my phone number and email, but the document that we share with you will have all of our details, so you could refer to that. So anyway, going back to the organic farming expedition, we thought it'll be great to have an expedition where children learn about organic farming. We are in Bhiwandi, where we have the luxury of space. So we have a huge 3.5 acre school, and we thought that we could do it. I want to take you through some of the steps that we did for the organic farming expedition. Let me share my screen. Is everyone able to see the screen? If they're not, just point it out to me. So the first thing I thought, okay, yeah. So the first thing we thought that before we get the students excited about this, it'll be nice to get the teachers excited about this. So we did a mini expedition with Rumi, who's our EL consultant. I'll show you some photographs of that. So yeah, basically what we did in this expedition is, like Chris was saying, we started with a hook where, how do you get someone excited about topic rather than saying, okay, we are going to learn about soil. How do you get excited about it? So we had a gallery walk and we didn't know to begin with. Romy didn't tell us to begin with that is going to be on soil, but some pictures, and we had discussions like what could the expedition be. And she basically got us excited onto that. And then we had a common topic that was introduced to us on soil. And then we had discussions around that. And then we were divided into different groups where we had group text that each of us would go through. And then we would have discussions, and then we would present it to the rest of the groups. And then we would have a session with the experts. And as our experts were people from the organic farming space. We've been lucky to have these people on board. And so we had a session on that. And then our end product, like Chris said, end product. So this was just a one-day expedition. So we tried to squeeze all of this, a mini expedition or a slice of an expedition. We tried to squeeze all of this in one day, but our end product was to come up with a book which would have a painting and some write-up on what each of us felt very deeply about on some aspect of the soil. And then we also had some field work where we went into our backyard, in the school's backyard, and we looked at the soil and the health of the soil and so on. Sorry. So these are some photos of us looking at the quality of the soil. And these, the one you see with the hanky on his head is one of the experts from the Organic V Sphere. And this is another interesting that they said is, if you have caterpillars in your soil, then it means the soil is healthy and then you can grow almost anything in it, anything on it. So this is one way you assess the quality of soil. Of course, you send it for testing also, but this is one way you assess the quality of the soil. This is Romy, our EL consultant. And then this is some field work that we did. Teachers doing the field work while they were out. Some reading that we did on soil. This is another expert, Shailesh, also from Organic V. This is all of the learning. We're trying to put it on a chart paper. Again, some learning. And this is where we learned, Chris spoke about, how you learn skills through an expedition. There it was about photography. Here it was about painting, at least some aspects of it. And these are some of the paintings that our teachers came up with. So we first learned how to do it, and then we did it. These are our initial drafts, and you'll see that it gets sophisticated. So one thing about EL expedition is you can't turn in a product and say we are done. You do multiple drafts, you learn from it, you have your peers review it, you have your experts review it. So everything goes through a process of multiple drafts, just like you have in real world. And this is everybody trying their hand at painting. And this is the final product that came out of it after many iterations. And so this was the book that we created. And on the right, on my right, you'll see, some writing on it, and then the paintings that the teachers came up with. And a lot of us were not really excited about painting because we didn't think we were good at it. But at the end of it, all of us could do it. All of us could write on it as well. So that was how we got started. And then we thought that how we introduce our children to it is give them one experience with that. And so I'll show you a video of how we took them to a neighboring farm where they were growing rice paddies. And I'll just show you a video of that. If you're not able to see audio, just if you're not able to hear the audio, please let me know. I'll just stop the video in between because I have a lot of content to cover the next 20 minutes. And so this was, as I said, this was on some other farm that we went to. And then the experts that we had from Organic Bee, Shailesh and Abhay said it shouldn't just be about organic farming, but it should, we should try to replicate the village economy because they strongly believe that 70% of us live, 70% of Indian citizens live in villages. And so children who have been part of this urban environment, they know very little about villages. So whatever they know it through movies where they are shown as typically backward people. And they said, no, they're really sophisticated. And so they said, we have to try to replicate village economy. And so they said, what does a village have? It has sarpanch, and they decide on important things. And they said, so let's have elections. And so what we did is, so this just to backtrack, we had children from KG2, which is senior KG, through grade 7. All of them participate in this, and we had multi-age groups. So basically, like one group would have like maybe 1 or 2 children from KG2 all the way till grade 7. So that there is peer learning, and there are there's learning from each other. The younger ones could look up to the older ones, and the older ones could show some leadership skills. And so we had these sarpanch elections, and I'll show you some photographs of that. This is where first they hear about villages and the elections and sarpanches and how that happens. They're examining the health of the soil like we did. So they are also looking for caterpillars, the children. These are the tools that they used. And this is where they're casting their vote. They're going to the ballot box. And these were our sarpanches or village leaders. Each group we voted, and the groups voted for these people to become their sarpanches or leaders. And then after that, we thought we knew, and the expert told us that we'll have to prepare our land to make it ready for sowing seeds. So I'll show you a video of the children doing that, preparing land. Here you'll see some bit of math coming. You'll see them demarcating. So we had this huge one big plot of land, which was I think 20,000-30,000 square feet. So we had to create these farms or villages out of it. So the children, they did it. They learned math around it. I'll show you that video. We had to pluck the weeds out before we actually started on this. And so this is the children praying, for the weeds that, we apologize to nature that we have to pluck those out. But then ultimately we are doing it for a good cause. But they started with a prayer before they started picking out those weeds. I apologize for kind of running through this. I know I'm out of time. I had just 15-20 minutes. I'll just give you glimpses of the different things that we did. And this was over a year. So this happened, month by month or so. Then came the interesting part. In organic farming, all of us know that you can't use pesticides, you can't use chemicals, but you still need to increase the fertility of the soil, and so you have to create your own manure. And that how you create is through using of cow dung and cow urine and jaggery, and so you mix it with mud and some flour and all of that. And so the children actually had to make this manure. And so we got it from some gaushala next to us. We got lots of cow dung and cow urine, and I'll show you a video of us making this manure. And as you can imagine, the children and teachers were really iffy about it, and you will be able to see from their faces because it really stinks. But now that we look back on it, the children say this is one of the best experiences that they had. I'll share with you the video. Yeah, so this was a very interesting experience for all of us. And then after making the manure, and then this of course takes almost 2-3 weeks. So you have to keep on stirring it, and then we would have children appointed. Different children would have they had created a timetable. So how this would work is the sarpanches would meet twice or thrice a week, and then they would think about what they need to do this week and the coming week, and then they would assign roles to themselves and to the other children, to the other villages, so to speak. And so they would have to keep stirring this manure every day for 2-3 weeks, so to make sure it ferments properly. And after that, it was time to sow the seeds, and I'll show you a video of the seeds that we sowed. So this was another interesting thing. So our partners from Organic, we said that how villages work is, at least this is the way it used to work for centuries before the Green Revolution, where village would have farming, where they would grow, the cereals and the grain. They would also have a lot of trees which would give the fruits, but then they would have these forests. And so what would happen is if you have famines, then 1 or 2 years fail, but you still have these forests to go back to. You still be able to sustain yourselves. And with modern agriculture, the forests have to make way for agriculture. And this has catastrophic consequences, as all of the farmer suicides and everything that we hear about is partly because of this, because they don't have anything else to lean on when you have a bad season or you have a famine. And so they said that what we need to do is we need to tell children that they need to, in their villages, they need to grow vegetables, they need to do fruits, and they also need to create some kind of a forest. So this is them sowing seeds. How do I get this started? Just 1 minute. So these are the plants and the trees that they were growing. And once you are done sowing the seeds, then comes a long waiting time before you harvest. One of the most important things, where they have to take care of everything that they did such an effort to grow. And so I'll show you a small video of them taking care. They're also taking notes, examining the health of the plants and the trees, and see how much growth has happened. And then they are hopefully trying to relate it back to some of the things that they learned in science. And here you'll start seeing some of the growth that is already happening after a couple of months, 2-3 months. Again, I won't be able to show the entire video. Then the next step was, a village economy is just not about farming and agriculture, but it's also about the local artisans. And we thought it'd be good to get a local artisan to come and visit us. So we had a Warli painter come in from the interiors of Maharashtra. She had to travel some 6 hours to reach here. She had to change, 3 buses, had to walk 4-5 kilometers. And she's from the original Warli tribe. We had our children from, I'll show you some photos about that. This is Aruna ma'am, Aruna Tai and her husband, who are from the local Warli tribe. This is the children. This is what the children have learned. We put it on this. Put it on this wall. We have a lot of discussions around it to make sure there's great participation happening. Here they are first learning about it and trying their hand at it. Aruna Tai's husband. They're learning about different aspects of Warli painting. It has to be done on a different paper. It's not even a paper, it's actually a piece of cloth, a special piece of cloth. This is what the children started coming up with. Now going back to what Chris was saying, like, how do you make the children excited about it? I mean, so they loved, by the way, they loved, being on the field. Every child in a class, you would find some children disengaged and some children, making the participation lively or really engaging with it. But when you take them on the field or on their farms, you have no such issue. Everyone, is participating wholeheartedly, and you feel like they are made to do this. They're made to do hands-on work and learn around that. But like, what is this all going to amount to? And so we thought there'll be 2 end products in our case. One is we have a very nice restaurant called Bombay Canteen in South Mumbai, and so they have a menu which is completely organic, and it keeps on changing every 3 months. And they source produce from around 22 states, and everything on their menu is made from ingredients which are seasonal and regional. So we thought if we could sell our produce to them, or we could pitch our produce to them, and if they would accept it, then it would be a great thing for us, and it'll be a great validation that what we've done is truly organic. So I'll show you some photos and videos of our children pitching what they had grown for the last 6-8 months, and then pitching it to Chef Thomas, who's a celebrity chef. He got the Chef of the Year award in India, and he's brilliant. So you'll see some photos, and you'll also hear chef talked how impressed he was with our children and why he would love to partner with our children.
It was really special for Takshama and me to see what you've done, all the hard work that you put in, all the efforts that have gone into this, the fact that all of you care so much. I think you should all feel lucky that you're studying in school because it's a very unique and special opportunity. I wish I had this opportunity when I was your age, but I didn't. Okay, so what you're doing is very important. You should also have fun while you're doing it, which clearly you are having fun. We would love to work with you. You convinced us through this presentation that we want to be partner with you as well. Okay, thank you.
Say thank you. So if you could hear the audio, he was just saying that he wished he had education like this, and that the children have convinced him that what they've grown is truly organic, and he would love to partner with us. So this was one end product, and so the idea was that we would grow stuff on our farms, and then we would provide it to Bombay Canteen. And then of course COVID hit, and we did provide them with some pumpkins, but I don't think we could follow through much more than. Second end product that we had in mind was to have a farmers market where the children sell the produce, but then we also have a celebration of everything which is sustainable. And so in this farmers market, children would show to other children who would come from other parts of Bhiwandi or other parts of Mumbai, how they would show off their farms and talk about the entire farming process. But then they would also talk about whether it is Wali painting or how do you make a hand sanitizer, which is completely organic. So basically celebration of everything which was organic. And we created a farmers market, and we spoke to a lot of journalists about it, and everybody said it's a great idea. We were very lucky to have Vijaya ma'am be a part of. We had a panel conversation. Vijay ma'am was one of the persons. That's how we got to know each other more. We had Zoe Hauser coming and bringing 30-40 of our teachers from BD Somani. We had lots of people from the organic farming space, people who have dedicated their entire lives to this. And so, they walked the talk. And yeah, so this was a great, culmination of the entire project. And I just want to show you some glimpses of that farmers market. I'm going to skip through the video and just show you the part about farmers market. Yeah, and this one second. Yeah, so it was an extraordinary project, and after this, we got an opportunity to present it at different places. We presented, our kids presented it at the CTS lab, which is kind of like a science conference where older grades 9 and 10, they talk about the science projects, and we had our younger kids presenting it. And it was a tremendous learning experience. I don't think at all of the components that Chris spoke about, but it was our first attempt, and I think we are really proud of what we did. I did so want to show you some of the couple of other projects that we did, but I think I have I think 3-4 minutes. There was this project, maybe I'll just talk about it. There was another project that we did called Bhiwandi Reimagine, where children, thought deeply about what they could do to better Bhiwandi. Bhiwandi is a difficult place to live. The civic infrastructure, great place, and so we thought that ultimately we are in Bhiwandi and we have to do something for the cause of Bhiwandi. So this was a year-long project that we did. The children first, explored the question of what is Bhiwandi. They stepped out. They took interviews of the common man on the road, the shopkeepers, but also professionals, the chartered accountants and lawyers, and doctors, and so on and so forth. And I have some really great photos of that, but I don't have time, so I don't think I'll be able to show you that. We realized that everyone had complaints saying that government corrupt hai, basically it was always they who were at fault, and they couldn't come up with one single thing what they personally could do to make things better for Bhiwandi. And so we thought this is not a good way to get started. And so what we did is we had an appreciation day close to Diwali, where children had their moms make homemade sweets. And we said before we talk to all of these civic officials, we need to make sure that we have good relationship with them, and we truly appreciate what these people have done. And so they went to the RTO office, and they went to the police station, and they went to the additional municipal commissioner. They went to the ST stand, and all of these to the fire brigade, and they gave them these sweets, and they said we really appreciate, like the RTO office and the RTO police. They said we really appreciate that you stand every day in this kind of pollution and in this kind of heat, and even when it's raining. And the police officers, they said, we really appreciate that you miss festivals, you miss family time during festivals like Ganpati and Navratri, because you have to spend a lot of time patrolling. And so what we saw was amazing. Like, if we go as adults, these people would have a wall built around them. And when these children go and they truly appreciate what they have done, they would let their guards down, and they would really welcome these children in. And we have beautiful anecdotes of, the additional municipal commissioner sharing his story, or a police inspector sharing his story. And they welcoming our initiative and wanting to take this forward. So that was the year-long project that we did. And there was this another project that we did around frogs. This was a very science project. I don't have the time to tell you about the project, but I do want to show you this great video. So the end product at the end of this frog expedition was to create a habitat for frogs, because children realized that frogs, amphibians as a large, if we are not careful, we'll lose about 1/3 of amphibian species. And we need to make sure that we don't do so much of damage to the environment. And so they said, let's create a frog habitat. So they created a pond from scratch. So I just want to show you this video quickly, although I know we are running out of time. Yeah, so just could manage to show you few glimpses of it. I have 4 minutes remaining, so I just wanted to draw your attention again to a few of the things. One is the document that Hemant shared at the beginning. Hemant, if you could share it again. It's a great document for you to learn more about expeditions, how to design them. You'll see examples of exemplar expeditions, some that Steve has, some that Chris has done, some others that Steve and Levy and the others have done. And then you also have our contact details, mine and Chris's. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is please share your school address. Okay, we'll do that. Another thing that we wanted to talk about is it's not related to project-based learning, but it's equally exciting about an individualized learning plans that we've created at Polymath School. So the idea is that children should be able to learn at their own pace, and we should be able to meet the children where they are. And so if someone's interested, I would love to do that. It basically, rather than coming into a class and telling a teacher, the teacher telling a student, today we are going to learn about fractions, and some children are really fast at learning that, and they get disengaged because they already get what the teacher is saying, and some are not able to catch, and then they get disengaged. So basically, we are trying to teach the average child, but the average child is a fiction. So how do you meet a child where he or she is? Every single child, how do you meet where he or she is? And so we've been able to create individualized learning plans for that, and would love to talk about that on a different occasion. And finally, a lot of people have told us is that we can't send our children to Bhiwandi because either we don't live in Mumbai, or even if in Mumbai, it's too far. So is there any way we can get enrolled into this? So we've started a Polymath online initiative where we'll be able to do some of this in an online environment. So if you know of anyone who's interested in doing project-based learning online, or wanting to do ILPs online, then this is a good opportunity. I think I'll hand it back to you, sir. And just one last thing before I hand it back. If there are any questions, we'll be here till 7 o'clock, and Chris and me would be more than happy to answer your questions. One quick thing, not everything in the curriculum can get covered through projects. Only 30, 40, 50% get covered. 40, 50% of the other aspects of curriculum have to be taught separately, but they can be taught in a creative way too. Sorry, I've exceeded your time. Back to you.
No problem, sir. No issues, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gandhi, for giving such a beautiful description of the whole process. It has been a very immersive, very engaging, and a very deep dive into the whole process. I'm sure every educator on the forum is going to appreciate, and the compliments in the chat box are a proof to that. So thank you very much, Mr. Chris, Mr. Bhavesh, for giving us such a beautiful insight. I just cannot refrain myself from thanking the CIR initiative with the founder, Mr. Dr. Srisan Gopalnath, and the likes of the advisory board of Vijay Ma'am, Dr. Suresh Nair, Dr. Bindu, who have realized that it is the need of the hour to bring in change and the 21st century strategies for educators. It is, I think we are grappling with the vicious cycle of rote learning, memorizing, and I just cannot forget the slide which Chris had shown us in the beginning, where one side the children were only memorizing and cramming up, and the other slide showed the young scientist on the learning expedition. I think this whole session has been so engaging and so nice. There are a few questions in the chat box, but I would really thank you once again for giving us such a perspective into the project-based learning, showing us how a journey of expedition can not only be informative, but fun and bring the joy of learning amongst the students. Thank you for sharing the independent individual lesson plans that we need. I think now it is for us as educators to soak in the information that you have so openly given us on this platform, observe, plan, and design smaller programs in the beginning, and then move on to immersive sessions of learning for our students. I'm sure that we have all enjoyed hearing to you. Now it is for us to put the plans into action and plan for our own. The details of Mr. Chris and Bhavesh ji are on the chat box for all to benefit from. All the participants are also requested to fill in the feedback form for CEIR. And CEIR continues on the journey of giving us more engaging sessions. The next one is going to happen on 25th of June on action research. All the educators, please fill in the forms, please register yourself. And after this, the resource persons are going to stay with us. And if any of you wish to ask for more questions, detailing of anything that you feel, please do continue. They are here with us. They have spared time today. So please take advantage of both the learned, knowledgeable resource persons who have just not spoken about it, but they have shown evidence. They have taken us step by step with all the research that they have engaged in to make it realistic. And thank you, Mr. Gandhi, for telling us that not the entire syllabus needs to be covered like this, but we can create thinkers in our classrooms who, after having a first-hand experience at some of the projects, can take the information that we need to give theoretically in the classes also, keeping the children engaged and growing as independent learners. Thank you so much. If there are any questions from the participants.
Ma'am, small this thing, ma'am. Now it is 6:30. We will officially conclude it. Then we will open it up for question answer half an hour. So you can conclude the session officially. Then we will extend it half an hour more, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sreesan. Thank you so much. I think it has been wonderful, and all that was shared. It is so difficult. I'm so overwhelmed by the beautiful presentation. And as you can all see on the screen, this is the 5th of the series of the 21st Century Teaching Strategies. 3 more are in the row. And after today's session, I'm sure we're all looking forward to being a part of the action research on 25th of June. So all of you kindly register, and the details are provided in the chat box. And Dr. Gandhi, we would all love that maybe someday we would be able to visit your school and learn more. And I think there was another very important question which I would like to again ask, if the time permits, sir, may I? Sir, there was a question that the project-based learning was beautifully done when it was offline prior to the pandemic. Now that we are online, can you suggest some ways of doing it in the post-pandemic era on the online platform also?
Chris, do you want to first take a stab at it, and then maybe I'll talk about it, what we are doing at Polymath?
Sure. Let me just close this down. So I think, to me, the same fundamentals still apply. So I would say, we need to lean into them more rather than to look at the obstacles or what can happen. Now, obviously, you can't do field work the way that or some of the activities that both of us highlighted, but the basic power of an expert and having them as an authentic audience to engage student learning, like practices such as that. There are times that our newfound comfort with virtual learning tools can actually facilitate and make easier. So for example, when COVID hit, that affected the culmination of the We Can't Wait learning expedition. So the Shark Tank portion of it, where we had students present to a real business panel to get feedback on the feasibility of their design, both scientifically and economically, had to be shifted to a virtual meeting, which in the end turned out to facilitate opportunity because we were able to include business people who were farther flung, right? We assumed it would have to be people originally that we would get to the school. Where now several of the individuals were farther away from Gurgaon, but it didn't matter because we were all on a Zoom call. So looking for ways that you connect students with experts and have them present their work. There's all kinds of virtual field work that you can do with various online resources in terms of people who've put content online. In terms of active citizenship, I think, the COVID pandemic has taught us the importance of character and community, even to a greater extent. So one of the things that I found very curious, even in my time in India, now that I'm seeing here in Bangkok, as well as which businesses survive and actually grow under the pandemic versus which fail. The common denominator isn't necessarily the business or the sector they're in. It's in the adaptability and the resilience of the business leaders. So those who can't adapt are often going out of business, where even in my, in Gurgaon before I left, there was a bakery that wholesaled particular baked goods, and their business completely shut down in the early days of lockdown. And then very quickly they found out, they reached out to some of their former customers and reinvented themselves with a very small delivery service using WhatsApp and Instagram. And I happened to join up, and because I still can follow them, their business now is bigger than ever, because they've figured out with the challenges of doing business under COVID, how to use social media and do a direct to consumer delivery service for what had been primarily a small cafe, but a wholesale business. The opportunity to use things like that in sort of a business studies or an economics case study, and to have students, engage in a project that would have them coaching small businesses into how to adapt their services for the pandemic, is exactly the kind of problem solving, the creative thinking, the resiliency that is those professional skill sets, which are equally as important as the traditional skills and content that we're teaching. So I'd say go through that list, which I will have to share that slide with Bhavesh, or I can, we can put a still up in there. But in each of those, I still think you can find ways to do them in the virtual context.
Thank you. I think this was the only official question that was asked. Before we open the floor for the open discussion, I would like to offer a vote of thanks to all the board of directors of CIR.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Prerna ma'am, you are very much audible.
Oh, my question is to Mr. Christopher. I just wanted to know from him whether he can take a session on project based to proceed. So should I? Hello.
Prerna ma'am, your voice was not audible. I'm sure you can talk to Mr. Christopher on the details that he has shared with us on the chat box.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your question. Your audio cut out at the crucial moment, which it always seems to do. So maybe you could try again, or if you want to try to toss your question into the chat box.
Prerna ma'am, I think you should write the question in the chat
I'm speaking from Varanasi and being English.
Prerna ma'am, as your audio is a little bit disturbed, you could put the question on the chat box. I'm sure Christopher will be happy to answer you and take it forward.
I would like to address one. I'd like to, by the time Prerna ma'am writes a question and then Chris answers, I just want to address a question that has come to me directly. I think it should have been posted to everyone. I'll just read out the question. Does every pedagogy have some limitations or demerits? If yes, then what PBL has according to your experience? What are major constraints with this pedagogy and how did you overcome it? Please share some examples. So I'm not a teacher, I'm the founder of the school. So I have a vantage point on that. In my mind, the pedagogy itself does not have any limitations. And Chris, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are extraordinary challenges in implementing it. We've faced a lot of challenges along the way to create a PBL school. The biggest has been addressing the concerns of our parents. We've tried over and over again to tell them how all of the different disciplines, whether it's maths and science and humanities and arts, everything gets integrated through the expeditions. And they're also learning about character, and they're also learning about 21st century skills. But they still think that this is some activity which is happening on the side. So, but padhte kab ho, academics kabhi hota hai. And so in their mind, this is something that children do after they have done some real studying. And so, getting parents on board has been one of the most difficult aspects of this, especially when you have a PBL school where all you do is projects, or projects are one of the main mediums through which you do it. Second is finding really good quality teachers. And so what we found is a lot of teachers are in the teaching profession because of the perks, because of the less number of hours of flexible holidays. And then there are very few who are in it for the passion of it. And I think getting such teachers on board has been very difficult. And so what we've done is we tried very hard to get the best teachers, and we realized that those best teachers, if we go and if we wait for them to approach us, it's not going to happen. So then we started going to the campuses of whether it's Tata Institute of Social Sciences, or Teach for India, or Azim Premji University, or Experiential Learning. I even went to IIT Mumbai to talk about it. So yeah, we go on the campuses, we try to get the best teachers, we remunerate them really, really well. And once we have these really great teachers, then as Google says, let the inmates run the asylum. We give them a lot of freedom. The culture of the school has to be very different. It can't be run in a hierarchical manner, top down. So they have a lot of freedom. They have a lot of say in it. As long as they do deliver on the skills, we don't really care how they do it. And so you have to have that creative freedom. There's a lot of training that gets involved, and training is easier said than done because all of these experts, most of them are from US. So, how do you get them to India, the cost that is involved. So there are, I could just go on and on. Extraordinary challenges in trying to do project-based learning for the school as a whole. I do think the number of challenges could come substantially down if you're trying to do it as a teacher. I think the parent piece would still be there. You still have to convince the administrators and the principal. But yeah, that's my take on it. Chris?
Yeah, so I essentially I agree with Bhavesh sir. I would say, particularly speaking to curriculum coordinators and school leaders, but also for teachers, I do believe, particularly in our context here in Asia, you have to accept an advocacy role with what you're doing. We have a running joke at my current school in DPrep with the parents that after each, we call them coffee hours, are our parent-facing sessions we hold. All schools have different versions of this, but sort of 1 hour, 1.5 sessions we hold once a month. And they keep joking, to make sure that we record their credit hours towards their masters in education from attending all of our coffee hours, right? The joke is we talk to our parents literally with some of the same language that you would students in a graduate school of education. That slide on standards, curriculum, and pedagogy, that comes from a parent-facing session. And the work that we're all doing in this, while we know it and why it's so critical, it's essential that we communicate that this is what rigor looks like. And we have to get a little technical in accomplishing this. I think it's a critical. Somebody asked me in the chat box, I'll try to connect this with a question I just saw come through, is this integrated with the regular curriculum? And that's a wonderful question, because that also is parents' question and speaks to what Bhavesh sir just said in terms of these are not separate fun activities that we're doing. These are the regular curriculum. It's a delivery method. So remember my slide with standards, curriculum, and pedagogy. Convincing parents that those standards, those learning objectives, the core syllabus is still being addressed authentically through these sets of experiences is critical. And the narrative is that experiential learning is making learning more fun by dialing down the rigor and making education more like play, is one that all of us must actively combat, because we'll lose the larger project of what we're trying to accomplish if that narrative sticks. So I use the word a rigor a lot when I'm speaking to educators and particularly parents about what we do. Because I'll be honest, I am trying to re-educate them as well. When I say rigor, they're thinking mark schemes and rankings and exam scores. And so I am trying to re-educate them to understand that is not authentic rigor. If you talk to I have a slide I often use from a survey of Google executives, and I don't think Google executives are the lone purveyors of what excellence or accomplishment looks like. But let's be honest, it's something parents relate to, right? Wow, imagine my child would be a top executive at a company like Google. So this is a survey of what they identify as the top 20 essential skill sets for a top executive in a company like Google in 2020. It's creative problem solving, it's research skills, it's chaos tolerance, right? The ability to crack an exam isn't on there. Now, again, we will have to continue to demonstrate excellence in test taking skills and whatever exam systems we're beholden to. But I think, coming back to the question, the challenge of this pedagogy is we also have to be advocates for it, and we have to educate parents how this is what rigor looks like. And we have to do it all. So we still have to make sure our students, whether they're taking CBSE still, or SATs, or Cambridge, or the IB exam, whatever system we're in, we have to make sure our students are able to do well in those metrics, at the same time produce this authentic, high quality student work. And Expeditionary Learning has a track record of doing it. We have these exams in the United States too, different versions of them. So Expeditionary Learning schools have demonstrated higher test scores while not teaching to those tests and still engaging in these authentic experiential learning projects. So there is proof of concept, it can be done. But it's really, it's really important that we're constantly engaged in this discussion that if conventional education is only trying to get that mastery of knowledge and skills, we're still trying to do that, and we're trying to develop character, and we're producing authentic, high quality student work that has a real audience and makes the world a better place. So experiential learning is not a dialing down, it's a ramping up. We're trying to do at least 3 different areas of achievement where a conventional exam-driven school is only trying to accomplish 1. So the last thing I'll say while I'm on my little soapbox here is back to the question of what are the strengths and weaknesses of the pedagogy, let's put it into challenges, and also is this connected to the main curriculum? This happens every time we do this. Both Bhavesh sir and I produce some great narratives about this fantastic, fantastic engaging projects. But what you don't see as clearly is the really critical work of standards or learning objective or curriculum mapping. So you must map your core content, those learning objectives or standards or syllabus, whatever schema you use to map out what must be taught. You must stick it. Sometimes I use a kind of a funny analogy. Once I have the emotional investment, I have the project, I have the experts, I can stick all kinds of learning onto it. If I was doing that farming unit with Bhavesh, maybe I have to teach water quality, and I can teach atoms and molecules, covalent and ionic bonding. I can teach all of that around the critical nature of organic farming. How can you understand chemical fertilizers versus organic sources of nitrogen? Let's take that. How can I understand a petrochemical source of nitrogen versus an organic source of nitrogen if I don't understand elements, compounds, molecules, ionic, covalent bonding, right? Now I'm suddenly into that nitty gritty of basic middle school level chemistry. And so I can have a very classic unit teaching atoms, molecules, solutions, mixtures, all that stuff in the context of an organic farming learning expedition. The kids are going to care about it, and they're going to have a reason to apply the scientific learning because of my larger experience I've created. But I still have to get to that technical mapping of the specific skills and content area knowledge. So I wouldn't put this as a weakness, I would put this as a challenge. Let's be honest, some teachers are not trained in this. If they have a textbook and they have a syllabus, they can just open to week 15 and follow the script. You cannot take that road with the type of curriculum development we're advocating. You've got to be the kind of educator who can go into the frameworks and remap them to these experiences. So it's exactly, you have to, but that makes us better teachers anyway. That's always, you know, the best schools do this, even if they're using a more traditional curriculum. We call this curriculum mapping, right? So having your staff really engage in your frameworks and be able to remap all those skills and content areas to these different experiences and make sure that they're maintaining that rigor, communicating it to the parents, measuring growth, right? There still is assessment. I must prove my students understand the difference between an element and a compound through my farming expedition and through being a comparison of natural versus petrochemical sources of nitrogen. I know I'm getting a little technical here, but I want to show you, you have to be able to go all the way from the wonderful, heady excitement of the hands-on, make the world better place learning experiences to the technical mapping of your core curriculum content. And then of course, assessment to make sure these students understand these concepts now and they didn't before it started.
Thank you, sir. I think it is not only the children, it is us as educators. We have grown up studying such watertight compartment of subjects that a maths teacher doesn't know anything about geography or the climate of the soil. They don't know about the history of the area. So I think it is us who have to relearn the whole process and integrate our learning and our approach when we are teaching or we are planning for integrated projects. Thank you, sir, once again for giving us a roadmap towards integrated learning, opening up our perspective that we as educators need to relearn, align ourselves into the new method of teaching, how to make art integration and all the other subjects integrate into giving a wholesome learning experience to our learners who are under our care. I think I'll take this opportunity now, once again, to thank all the board of directors, the zonal directors, the principals and teachers, and all the participants who are here today on the forum. And I also thank Dr. Sreesan from the Veda Handwriting Lab for all the support and bringing in such enriching sessions to us. I thank you all once again. The stage will remain open for discussion for a few more minutes. So the participants who need to talk to Mr. Christophers and Bhavesh sir, please carry on the discussion. Dr. Sreesan, I'm sure.
Now I think we can unmute all. I mean, the numbers are also coming down to 48. Yes. Please unmute all the participants. Let us have a small interaction.
Free interaction.
Please unmute all the participants.
Good evening, Chris sir.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening. Good evening. You can hear.
Good evening. Chris sir, just I wanted to ask one more question, that what is the difference between, is there any difference between problem-based learning and project-based learning? And secondly, I want to ask which of the method is better for higher studies like +1, +2, senior secondary students? Is it to which you can say which method we should be given priority, like collaborative learning, project learning, or individual learning?
So, you know, if you ask that question to different people, you're going to get different answers. I definitely am what I would describe as syncretic thinker when it comes to education and pedagogy. So I think, you know, not to be too ethereal, but there's that old, I think it shows up in many traditions. I'm familiar with the Zen Buddhism that says, don't mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon. So all these systems, all this language that we're talking about, whether it's PBL, experiential learning, expeditionary learning, problem-based learning, they're all fingers pointing at a moon. And they all have their limits in terms of being able to fully describe the moon, right? They're all trying to be evocative and get us to think, what is the moon? Gosh, far be it for me to define that. But in this metaphor, I would say that moon is when students are leaders of their own learning. When it's organic, when it's powerful, when it's that full, deep learning experience. So these are all systems that we've made up to try to create the right ingredients, the right conditions to create that aha moment, but we all know when we've seen it as educators, when we could leave the room and the students would keep going. They're in control. They're constructing their own meeting. They're driving the learning, whatever, a language you'd want to put on it. So I would say, when you're trying to build something, I'll switch metaphors here to a carpentry one. You need a big toolkit. Sometimes you need a chisel, sometimes you need a saw, sometimes you'll be working with hand tools. Sometimes, you need a chainsaw to cut things up. Put all these toolkits in your pedagogical basket. Don't limit yourself by this is a PBL concept or this is problem-based, right? So in my jargon, when I think of problem-based, it's often used in like mathematics. So they'll talk about making sure you give students sort of a problem to unpack and derive a concept from, so that they discover, for example, they discover a formula through the course of trying to solve a problem, rather than give them the formula and then have them apply it, right? That has a role in project-based learning, right? Because we give students all the problems all the time. So an analogy would be that in the sustainability We Can't Wait learning expedition, students chose the problem of cooking fuels and the burning of organic stuff and the health complications that gave of air quality. That was their problem to solve, and then they drew on science and all of that. So is that problem-based education or project-based? Honestly, I don't care which one you call it. In terms of your question about individual versus collaborative, it's all about, to me, striking the right balance. And again, for the strongest guidance you'll get is not from listening to me, but think open-mindedly and critically about the professional skill sets and roles your students might take out of school. So what's the role of collaborative learning in math and science, right? It's in our traditional pedagogy, there really isn't a lot of one, right? And because we think, I want to know your individual achievement as a math. Why do we have students solving math problems together, right? That must be bad. They might cheat, or one student might earn a higher score because they got help from the other student. We should have them work individually. There's a time and place for individual work, absolutely. But find me the mathematician practicing, whether it's in engineering, data analysis, medical research, whatever. Find me the mathematician who gets to work by themselves the majority of the time. And I don't think you can. Because in the real world, look, everyone is on this call. Raise your hand if you only work by yourself and rarely have to collaborate. Nobody gets to do that. Maybe that would be easier. Working with other people can be really hard. There's personalities, different agendas, different skill sets, but collaborative learning is not about making learning more fun, or because we're trying to make it, we're trying to shore up weaker students by pairing them with stronger students. I would make the argument that's the reality of any work that you're going to do, any meaningful work. You must work collaboratively. So collaborative learning to me is always there, even at the highest levels, because look at graduate school. I mean, it's funny, I could oversimplify education reform by saying it's taking elements of graduate school and early years and moving it to the middle. Because for some reason in early years, we do a lot of open-ended investigation, concept, exploration, hands-on, and then we wean it away and students stop, and then they start again in graduate school. Why stop it in the middle? So I think the main difference is what is very interdisciplinary in our projects in the middle years tends to become more disciplinary as you move into high school and into the senior grades. And that's fine. You can take everything about an interdisciplinary, structurally, if you go through those bullet points, you can take almost all those elements and put them in an AP biology class, or other thing, or a statistics class, or a business studies class, a senior level class. You don't always have to do them, between different subject teachers. You can still have the powerful elements of a learning experience taking place. So my opinion is put all these things in your toolkit. Always come back to, how am I empowering my students for their livelihood in a professional role once they get out of a school context? The more we can take the contrived elements of what we think of as the modern school and deconstruct those and make teaching and learning happen in the way that people really develop skills. You know, if you ask industry and business what they want us to teach students, they will tell us, and they have, there's plenty of articles and research you can find. They said, we can't teach them the specific knowledge because it's changing so fast. Even by year 12 in high school, by the time they get out of college, the specific coding language, the specific facts will have changed. The most important thing we can teach them is how to learn, because they're going to have to learn in their professions, in their career. Take any doctor, even after med school, 4 years into their field, whether you're a gastroenterologist, an anesthesiologist, everything will have changed. New research, new studies. Those who thrive and go to the top of their fields are those who can quickly ascertain this new knowledge, remap it, learn new techniques, collaborate with their colleagues, communicate through writing, understand data, right? All these different skill sets. So it's that concept-based, that adaptability, that rapid capacity to learn that are the most enduring skill sets that are going to empower our learners. So we focused a lot on elementary and middle, but absolutely these practices move into the more advanced grades. I would just say the general trend is it becomes more disciplinary. So you might be doing this within a more confined disciplinary area, but you can still hit all the structural elements. Did that address
Yes, sir.
question?
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I think twice it has been asked, who is the authentic audience and what is the authentic product? If you could just spare a few minutes for this, sir.
Sure. So an authentic audience means what that's playing around with is come back to the idea that in the traditional school, the only audience for student work is the teacher, right? So all my learning, all my growth, everything I'm doing, the only person I ever present it to is the teacher. And teachers are wonderful and they have their role in assessment. But the idea is the motivation. So in the case of the book, that Every Face Has a Story that I shared, the authentic audience is the public, just like PARI. And the reason that drives high quality work is hopefully I have some motivation to make my teacher proud. But again, it's coming down to marks. And in the worst case scenario, this learn or you'll feel shame. I'm going to get a bad grade. Whereas in the case of this book, if you tell a 7th grader this book is going to be published and people are going to pay money for it. So the importance of not having grammar mistakes, having correct spelling, not getting city names wrong in Rajasthan or screwing up the history of the Banjara is much higher because they know their work is going to be looked at at the same standards as other published work. So the motivation for doing high quality work and for its authenticity is increased when I put it in front of in front of an audience. So that's and the authentic product side is, again, scientists, real engineers and scientists don't take science tests. They engineer solutions to real problems. So in the biogas generator, the biogas is an example of an authentic product. I can still require students to demonstrate all kinds of biology, physics, chemistry, content area knowledge through the product, but why it's an authentic product is it's not just a test. It represents the way that real scientists have to demonstrate their knowledge and solve problems. An authentic audience is in the business investors. So we didn't have them present their business model for their sustainability solution to a panel of teachers. By having them present that in front of, again, another example of authentic audience, the guy who started the first solar company in India, the true venture capitalist who takes real people's money and invests it in startups. And the other guy was like a marketing business development person who could very quickly, pick apart boy, these students were shaking in their boots, proverbial boots, so to speak, more so than in front of any exam, but it was in a good way because it wasn't an exam like, oh my goodness, you mean we're going to be talking to real, yeah, these are real business people. And they're not going to be bamboozled. They're not going to just take it easy on you because they're kids. They're going to be saying your numbers don't add up. I don't see how your profit and loss. If I give you money, it's a great idea. I'm glad you want to help people. But if you bleed cash, you're going to be out of business in a month. So the attention they put to try to really have an authentic business model was increased when we put them in front of an authentic audience. So those are just examples, a couple of examples of what we mean by authentic products and authentic audience.
Thank you, sir. There's another question, but it is repetitive. If you would answer it. Are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary learning types of PBL also? And if so, at what stages should we integrate?
So the people who created those terms would argue all day long that they're all very different. But you're listening to me, so you're going to hear me say that mush it all together. Again, this is your toolkit. Put it all in your toolkit. So, transdisciplinary is a term beloved by PYP in the IB program, which is meant to truly break down the distinctions between the disciplines. I think you said interdisciplinary would be more like the project I showed, Every Face Has a Story, in which we had a global perspective teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, an English language arts teacher. So students still had those classes, but they combine the skill sets in the actual product. There's a time and a place for all of those, in my opinion. And I would, the proponents of those, again, would argue the merits of each of them. I would say, don't get bogged down in them. You will follow the needs of your students, right? So I work at a PYP. I've worked at a PYP school, which seeks to be, I hope no one's listening from IB, that seeks to be transdisciplinary, but so many of our students are English language learners. We have dedicated English language arts time. So we need that moment. Net we apply the English language arts skills in the transdisciplinary units of inquiry, but math and literacy usually need some dedicated time in the schedule. So give yourself permission to follow, I think, what you know to be right for your students. Don't get caught up in the dogma of any one of those models, because there's a time and a place for all of them. But go back to that bulleted list I gave you. All of those elements can be done in transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. They're beholden to none of them. So you can use all of them. And just while I'm on that soapbox, I want to touch base with something Bhavesh sir said. Even in your curriculum that has to be taught outside of your learning expeditions or your projects, don't throw out all your good pedagogy just because it's a standalone unit. You could still bring in an expert. You could still focus on concepts over concept memorization. You can still use guided questions, right? There's so many of those active pedagogy elements that are the hallmarks of these project-based learning or expeditionary learning. Those various good practices can still inform your standalone units so that they're rich, they're engaging, they're concept-driven, and they're student-centered.
Thank you so much, sir. I think your discourse has told us that project-based learning helps us to collaborate not only amongst our students, but educators. It will help us to give problem-solving skills to our children. It will also encourage and foster creativity and giving in-depth understanding of the topic that we are studying, that is understudy, and also associating all the other subjects with it. Thank you. I think this project method learning will not only give us knowledge, but also enthuse self-confidence in the learners, will help us to develop critical thinking, perseverance, because it takes, you have termed your project-based learning as an expedition, which is a takeaway for me for today, as an expedition to learning. Thank you. So it will help me to persevere with my children and making them learn It will also give us the skill set of project management to our students. And we as educators will also learn how to manage our expedition, a journey of learning. I'm sure if we are able to follow this in a small ways, it will make our children curious towards learning, and it will empower them and make them independent learners. Thank you so much, sir, for such an enriching, amazing discourse, a lecture, a talk, a giveaway. I'm so thankful to you and overwhelmed by your examples, the pictures, the documentaries, the records that you have shown us. Thank you, Dr. Sreesan, once again. Amazing session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. I request either Sunita ma'am or Sanam ma'am to do the final, the closing remarks. Then we will wind up. Either Sunita ma'am or Sanam ma'am, whoever.
Good evening, everyone. This was a very, you can say, inspirational and excellent session about project-based learning. And we have got to know so many things about projects, and we have, like sir has sent, Chris sir and Bhavesh sir have sent the videos and a topic also regarding that project-based learning. We have gone through that also. It was amazing. Like salmon in the topic, they have given that salmon hatching in the river, and how through salmon hatching they can teach biology along with the ecology, along with that oxygen, dissolved oxygen in water and chemistry and everything, and along with that earth studies also. And same is with the session, like Rita ma'am also told that he has taken this session as it is an enlightenment for all of us, and definitely we'll try in this this project-based learning in our schools also. But like Bhavesh sir told, it is very correct that parents, to bring the parents on board along with this project-based learning is very difficult, because they will think, they will say, when are you studying? Where are the classrooms? Why students are wasting so much time in the ground or in the field or somewhere else? It's very difficult. It is very good, but to bring it to the classrooms, to the schools, and in the lives of our students is a task. Definitely, we have taken a lot from Chris sir and Bhavesh sir, and we'll go with it. Thank you, Bhavesh sir and Chris sir, and thank you, Sreesan sir.
Thank you very much. Vande Guru, Vande Guru. Thank you.
Vande Guru. Vande Guru.
Thank you all for this